that's one of the things when you start out, you always hope, okay, we're gonna set up something that's gonna be here. And essentially when we talk to people, our supporters, but our donors, particularly landowners and so on, I mean, we're making a promise to them, we're gonna be here forever to look after this land. That's our part of the bargain.
It's a long time.
That's a long time, yeah, it's a long time. So, I think
And there are
we're
certain
over that
landowners
hill,
who,
in a sense, yeah.
and there are certain landowners who held us to that promise. They waited 30 years to actually make their donation,
Yeah,
just to check out that we really were not fly-by-night people.
yeah, and you can understand why, sure.
Yep. What I hope for in the next 30 years is more of the same. Continued spot in the community, the continued goodwill of the community, and more properties, more money. Maybe not more stuff, but certainly more money.
You can't have more staff, you have to add on more, yeah,
More money.
more money, more
That's
rooms.
right.
Yeah, more
Yeah.
rooms. Yeah, already. Who would have known?
One of the things that I've watched with a good deal of interest over the last 30 years is the sort of growth of the land trust movement in Ontario as a whole. Because when we started out, we were one of the first. The Rideau Waterway Land Trust was about the same vintage, and there was another one over in the
Thames.
Thames Talbot.
And Talbot, yeah.
And the one in eastern Ontario, around the St. Lawrence River. So there was a few that all started out at roughly the same age. But for the first quite a few years, I would say, the first decade, we were clearly sort of in the lead, right? That we were the organization that others looked up to in terms of, how do we do this, how do we do that? And I spent a fair bit of time in my spare time, going around talking to other land trusts and helping a few of them where they had crisis points and so on. But that's changed to a large extent. So now there's land trusts like the Thames Talbot who are, I would say, as strong as we are, or close to it anyway. And they are, involved in projects, half a dozen projects a year, and some of them involving land purchases, and they had the great advantage of having the Ivy Foundation, who basically said, okay, we'll give you $1 million to work with here, as sort of working capital for land acquisition.
Wow.
Yeah, that was quite a few years ago. They still have most of the $1 million because they're sort of, refreshing it as they go. But it gives them that sort of deep pocket ability.
Yeah, which is very, very useful.
Which is very useful. And there's other, like Kawartha Land Trust, which was sort of nowhere in the beginning. They're more recent. But because of some great individuals involved, they're doing just some amazing projects that, a multi-million-dollar island in one of the Kawartha lakes that they've conserved, and lots of others. So it's been interesting that we've been able, and still are able, to help other organizations to sort of export ideas on some of the good work that Tanya and others have been working on in terms of ideas that have worked well for others. But we're no longer the sort of leader of the pack necessarily. We're one of a group of 5 or 6 Ontario Land Trust.
I think we can say we're the elder
states.
statesmen of Land Trust of
Yeah, we can
Ontario.
say, sure, we can say we're the elder statesmen, and I still think we do lots of things well, but others are doing lots of things well as along with us, and that's really rewarding to see, because I think we've had a very positive impact on a number of those organizations in terms of,
Absolutely.
you know, yes, we can do this, yeah, it's possible to do this. Some of them unfortunately sort of, you know, keep mired in the muck and
Yeah,
haven't quite been able to kind of get up to the point where they have the degree of community awareness and support and so on that they need, but a lot of them have.
The idea of expanding the properties is certainly a target, to the point where maybe we could have a major proportion of our area under protection. As in, say, Costa Rica, a country that has designated a third of its territory for natural heritage protection. And if we could do something similar, and do we have a target? Could it be a third? Is it enough? Is it too much? Half of our entire area protected? Imagine. Oof. And I know that over the next 30 years, it isn't going to be as maybe smooth sailing as it has been over the first 30. And we are going to run into rough patches, no doubt, with changes in leadership and the economy and donations and whatnot. And so how do we keep these 50 properties protected over the long term? That's an expensive proposition. To steward all of those and more that are coming in. I mean, as the snowball grows,
yes.
and more properties keep coming, how are we going to be able to afford to protect all of those? And so that is what led me and I know Ron and Janet and other past presidents to band together and say, how can we establish an endowment fund that would be sufficient to keep the lights on through those lean times?
Yes.
And so we got together. It's really interesting that, you know, many organizations toss their past presidents, you know, into the ditch and never hear from them again. Not the Conservancy. Every past president in its history are part of this group called the Past Presidents Council that have...
We're all still alive. Maybe that's linked somehow.
And we decided we were going to raise an endowment fund to try to keep the lights on indefinitely through good times and bad. And we got the help of John Lister, who's a fundraising consultant, who guided us through a feasibility study to see what our potential was. And Janet had this notion of $1 million. You said it. Wouldn't it be great if we had $1 million in endowment? And we thought, that is a great idea. John Lister we did the feasibility study, and John came back with his report and said, 10 million.
And we all gulped hard.
We all gulped. And here we are already at $3 million and still growing. So
Yeah.
that's hopeful for me. That is a sign of hope that is promising, and it speaks to the position that the Conservancy has established for itself in this community.